Yo, what is up? It is your boy Zether back at it again with a brand new movie special. And this is because you amazing people have ended up getting me to 7K after a week after I just hit 6K. You guys are just absolute mad lads, and I'm honestly so blessed to have you guys with me through this dope journey that is, my YouTube, I would say career, but it's not really that. So my YouTube growth, I guess you could say. And honestly, guys, I'm praying that I continue to grow at this amazing pace and that I honestly continue to make what ifs that you guys enjoy and love. But, with that being said, let's just go ahead and get right into the movie, since I know you guys aren't exactly here to hear me be all sentimental, since that was enough for today, right? So yeah, with that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoy this video of what if Deku was Jellal Fernandes. So let's go ahead and get started. So this story is actually going to start off when Deku was born. Now, in this version of events, Deku's actually going to be having the blue hair that Jellal has. And this is because of Inko. In this version, instead of having the normal green hair that she has, she's actually going to be having blue hair. And that's going to pass on to Deku, just like you would expect it would. And in terms of Deku's childhood, things are actually going to be a little bit better for him. Because people honestly think that blue hair is a little more common. So therefore, when Deku's, getting bullied, he doesn't actually get bullied half as much because, his hair isn't really something that the kids can pick on. And other than that, he's honestly pretty cool. So people actually don't really mind Deku too much. And this honestly stays the same up until one day when, Deku's actually getting picked on a bit. And, nobody's really there to help him. But after this situation, Deku decides that he's gonna stand up. He's gonna stand up for himself and other people who can't do it for themselves. So anytime that he sees somebody else getting bullied or himself, he's gonna stand up for himself and he's gonna, do what's right. So Deku's gonna be a little different. So this is when we're gonna go ahead and skip on over to another day when this girl by the name of Katsuki is actually getting bullied by some kid with his wing quirk and finger quirk. They would have been two of the, very first people to actually unlock their quirks. And this is when Deku would proceed to see Katsuki getting bullied. As yes, this is, gender bended Bakugo, just throwing that out there. You'll see why I'm doing this. This is not just because, I'm being weird, but this is for this is for a real reason. Now check this out. So this is when Deku would actually step up and say, "Hey, leave her alone. You guys are being mean. This is not what heroes would do." As the kids would look at him and say, "What do you know, Deku? You don't even have a quirk yet." As they would say, "So you better get out of here before you're next." As he would then look towards Katsuki and see how scared she is, as Deku would look at them and say, "No, I won't let you guys hurt her." As they would rush at Deku, and this time, Deku, instead of just being terrified of them, he would actually rush at them too, as he just starts running slowly and just begins to, start throwing punches and stuff. As the two kids would pretty much be like, "Ah!" As he actually ends up beating them up. The two kids' quirks were really weak at this point, so that's the reason that he's able to do it. And afterwards, this is when he wipes off a little bit of, blood that they took out of him. As he says, "I'll always win because I'm fighting for the right reasons." As the two boys just run off and they're like, "You freak!" As, they run off. And this is when Deku would turn to Katsuki. As he would turn at her and smile, saying, "Are you okay?" As she would look at him and just be like, "Thank you." As Deku would say, "It's no problem, Katsuki. I saw that they were bullying you, and it was only the right thing to step in and help you. I mean, they're taking advantage of their quirks. Yeah, they're amazing, and it must be great to know what it's like to have a quirk, but just because you have one doesn't mean that you get to belittle people like this." As she would look towards Deku and say, Yeah, you're right." As this is when Deku and Katsuki would actually start to talk a little bit. As Deku and Katsuki would actually develop a really dope relationship off rip. As she would actually look at Deku and ask him if he wants to hang out. As they proceed to hang out for the next 2 weeks, and this is when Katsuki would actually discover her quirk. As Katsuki would actually realize that her quirk is explosions, and for the next 2 months, she would actually be the one who defends Deku, seeing that she has one of the most powerful quirks around, and that Deku's there mostly, and all he has is really just a decent brute strength for his age. I guess you could say. So he's not exactly weakling. And, this is when their relationship would continue to grow, as Katsuki would not actually develop no sort of superiority complex over Deku, as things would actually be a lot different than you would expect. So, things are going to change up a little bit. So, this is when we're now going to be jumping over to the day that Deku's actually going to be going to the Quirk Doctor, as this is when everything's actually going to be changing. Now, when Deku's actually at the Quirk Doctor, this is when the doctor would notice that this kid actually has a power, and his quirk it's amazing. It's named Heavenly Body Magic, and this is when the doctor would kind of have a weird moment, as he would just look towards the child and he would look towards the child as he would say, "Oh, this is gonna be great for All For One. He will be most excited," as he would try to steal Deku's quirk. And yes, I am going to be using the speculation that the Quirk Doctor is actually able to take quirks from kids. So this is when he would try to grab Deku's quirk, as he would grab Deku's hand, telling him to close his eyes and just stay still, as he actually has the quirk to help people unlock their powers. So he would try to rip the quirk away from Deku, but it wouldn't work. It would fail. And Deku would actually show signs of, after this, he would actually show signs of not having a quirk at all. His pinky toe joint would still be there, and after some other research, he would realize that this is actually not even a quirk at all. This is something completely different. Also, before I keep going into the story, guys, sorry if you guys hear some barkings. It's just the neighbor's dog, so can't really do too much about that. But, you guys may not actually hear it at all. So, you guys may just be wondering, like, what is this kid talking about? But, yeah, let's just go back into the story. So, this is when, the doctor would actually look towards Inko, as he would ask her if she could bring him back the very next day for more examinations to see how his quirk works. And she would actually smile towards the doctor and tell him that, yeah, that'll be just fine. As the doctor would say, perfect. As this is when he would actually contact All For One, as he would inform All For One about this kid's potential and ability to call upon the power of the stars, as All For One would be extremely intrigued by this power or quirk, as he would actually set Deku up to be kidnapped the very next day, as he would have a villain of his basically destroy the hospitals. He would cause a bit of a ruckus out there, while All For One would actually be there to take Deku. And he would actually be the one who, quote-unquote, saves Deku this time, taking him to his lair, as he would proceed to actually grab Deku in the middle of all this chaos, as the villain would jump in there and shoot a giant fire attack, as the building would collapse a little bit. And this is when All For One would jump in there as he grabs Deku, and Inko would see a man grabbing Deku, as some debris would fall on Inko, crushing her leg and limiting her there, as Deku would scream, "Mom!" As this is when All For One would grab Deku and close his eyes as he says, "I got you, kid. You won't get hurt," as he would grab Deku and rush him out into an alleyway. This is when he would proceed to manipulate Deku into thinking that he's a savior, that his mother died, and that if it wasn't for him, he would have also been next. As he would just make Deku think that he's there to help Deku, and Deku being a little kid, he would fall for it. At this point, Deku's nothing but a mere 4 years old, so this actually wouldn't pose that much of a difficulty for All For One to kind of manipulate this small Deku. So things would actually go by very easily, as Deku would actually begin to talk to All For One, asking him why he saved him, as All For One would say that he was actually one of the nurses, or actually one of the patients there, who was actually getting treated, but when he saw that the ruckus was happening, he was going from room to room telling people what was going on, as he saw that some debris was falling on Deku, or about to, as he would have actually rushed in there and grabbed him before anything could have happened. As Deku would smile at All For One, as at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and use the thing that at this point, All For One still hasn't taken Shigaraki under his wing. And this may not make sense, but just accept it. This is going to be very, very useful for what we're going to be doing. As he would actually not have, Tomura Shigaraki. He would actually be determined to have this young boy be his successor, instead of that, that brat of, the master of All Might. As Deku would just look towards All For One, and with no reason to, not trust him, he would just trust him blindly, as he would just accept what All For One is telling Deku. As Deku would have a little bit of doubts within himself, but seeing that he's a little kid, he would start to trust him. As a couple of years go by, or actually no, a couple of hours would go by, sorry, as Deku would ask All For One if it's okay if he goes to his dad. As All For One would say, your dad? Oh, kid, you must not have heard. Your dad left you guys. As Deku would just say, what are you talking about? As All For One would tell Deku that he actually did a little bit of research into Deku, as he would show Deku fake pictures of Hisashi, who he had actually kidnapped and made it look like he actually, went away from Deku, would have showed Deku some pictures of him just being with another woman and another kid. As Deku would see this, as he wouldn't understand, but he would say, my dad is, I have a brother? As All For One would tell him, no kid, he left you guys. As Deku would be crushed. And at this point, All For One would wrap his hand around Deku as he would pull him in tightly for a hug, telling him not to worry, that he's going to be there for him and be the father that Hisashi never was for him. As he would actually manipulate Deku more and more. And this is when we're actually going to be having a little bit of a time skip, to the point where Deku's actually 9 years old. And during that time, All For One would have actually been training Deku, because he would have essentially been telling Deku that he's training him to become a hero. What Deku had always wanted to do, but after all this time of being around All For One's influence, his desire to become a hero would have actually faltered a bit, seeing that Deku's actually not exactly going to be around all that All Might stuff and stuff like that. And All For One would have actually twisted Deku's view of All Might, telling him that All Might isn't really a true hero, telling him that All Might was actually the cause of his wife's death. As Deku would have actually asked him one day where his wife was, but All For One would simply tell him that it was actually All Might's fault that his wife is gone. As All Might would actually have no real choice but to just accept what All For One is saying. As for the next couple of years, All For One would continue to train Deku to become a strong vessel, a pawn of his successor. As I'm actually going to say that in terms of the fight for All For One and All Might, that's actually not going to be happening, because in this version, All For One would actually be more focused on this kid instead of caring too much about All Might, saying that he wants him to be the one who destroys him, as a sort of test to see how far this boy can go in terms of his powers. As All For One would actually be at his prime, as well as All Might, meaning that All Might wouldn't have that life-threatening injury, and he would actually be at 100%. And this is essentially how, things would happen for the next couple of years. As after all this time, Deku would actually begin to doubt All For One and doubt everything that he's saying to him. He would begin to show some signs of not really trusting All For One, and he would actually begin to ask All For One what his true intentions are, but All For One would have actually prepared for this. As during this time, he would have actually stolen a mind-warping quirk, or a subtle, a sort of Kuro Matsukami thing, where he, kind of injects subtle, mind-warping things to make people believe they're doing what they want. As he would actually use that quirk on Deku, as he would actually tell Deku that he's going to talk to him about everything and tell him the truth. As he would tell Deku to come here, as Deku would walk up to All For One, and All For One would actually grab Deku's head, as he would say, I have a quirk to, telepathy show my past. So he would hold his hand on Deku, as Deku would know of All For One's multiple quirks. So he would grab Deku's face, and this is when a red light would appear, as Deku would have realized what's going on, as he would try to fight back, but it would be too late. As at this point, Deku would be completely under All For One's control. Now, some of you guys may be wondering, how strong is Deku after all these, after the 5 years of training? And what abilities can he exactly use from Jellal? As, you guys won't actually be having to, worry about that too much. As at this point, after 5 years, Deku would actually only have access to heavenly body magic and telepathy, being able to talk to people through their minds. And he would actually have about some other cool things, as after all these years of training, he would actually be very well trained in mostly hand-to-hand combat as well as stealth, seeing that the Jellal in Fairy Tail was able to go into the Magic Council. So we're definitely going to have a Deku who's able to manipulate his way through things, as All For One would have taught him these things. And he would also have a good grasp over his magic and abilities. And he wouldn't actually be as powerful as Jellal at this point, being that he is a 9-year-old child, but he would have about 7% of Jellal's power at this point. A weak Jellal, the one of the Tower of Heaven. As I know that Jellal is extremely powerful, but we're going to be saying that at this point, Deku has the strength of a Jellal who just had his, who was just taken under the control of Zareth, or, the evil guys from the thing that they pretty much did at the Tower of Heaven. As this is essentially how things are going on at this point. As, this Deku would not be that strong, but he would definitely be packing a very strong punch. So now, this is when we're actually going to be covering the next couple of years, which actually will consist of Deku training more in hand-to-hand combat and actually, upping his power and strength up to where he can actually be used as a weapon of mass destruction, as all for one would see Deku as the perfect vessel. He has the power to call upon the power of the stars and astral beings. This is way beyond any quirk that any other child may have even manifested. This is even stronger than All Might's power. As over the next couple of years, during this time, Katsuki's life would have actually changed a bit. As, Katsuki and Inko would have actually been distraught after Deku's disappearance. As this is when I'm actually going to be covering what happened on that day. After the debris fell on Inko, the debris would have only actually fallen on her leg. And this is when one of the doctors would have actually grabbed Inko as he dragged her out of the hospital, as one of her legs would actually be, broken. But it would actually be able to heal, but it would never work the same way that it ever once did. So that's essentially how Inko was able to manage to get out of that horrible situation. As over the next couple of years, after this, Katsuki would actually, find out about what happened to Deku. As Inko would have actually told Mitsuki, seeing that Deku and, Katsuki were friends, she would have actually been able to inform them. As he would actually, for the first time, not exactly know what's going on, but once she got older, she would definitely know what happened to Deku. As this would actually be her motivation and her reason to become a hero, as she would swear to Inko that one day she's going to become strong enough and someday find Deku. That's her goal as a hero. That's what she's becoming a hero for. And her views on heroes is way better than the one that Bakugo had in the original canon. As it would not be this, I have a powerful quirk, so I'm going to stomp on people. No. It would be more like, I have a powerful quirk, so I'm going to be here to help the weak and be a symbol of peace. As now, we're actually going to be skipping over to the day of the sludge villain. As this encounter would actually go very different. Seeing that Katsuki doesn't jump up on the table, that wouldn't exactly happen. And this time, she would actually be going to Inko's house. As today would actually mark the 11th day that, the 11th year, This would actually mark the 11th year since Deku's disappearance. And this is the day that, after every year, Inko and Katsuki would have a day to just have a day for Deku. To, just never forget about him. As Inko would have actually never actually had a child, as Hisashi would have actually been taken by All for One and taken out by him. But Inko would have actually not been taken care of at all, since he views her as nothing but, just some piece of garbage who gave birth to his vessel, as he doesn't really care about her. And this is when Katsuki would actually take the tunnel to get to Inko's house pretty fast, as this is when, the sludge villain would appear out of the sewers, as he would rush at Katsuki, yelling, "Give me your body, kid!" As yes, the story is actually going to be covering both Katsuki and Deku's point of views for the next couple of years, but don't worry guys, the story is about to get very interesting, as you guys are about to see. So this is when the sludge villain would rush at Katsuki, and she would say, "What the?" As the sludge villain would jump on her, and she would say, "No," as she would actually be caught up in the sludge, as this is when she would begin to fall into a sort of weird state that Deku was in, and she would be fighting back, and this is when she would proceed to say, "No, is this where I die? I can't die here. I have to save Deku. I have to save Deku!" As she would launch her strongest explosion at the ground, and she says, "Ah!" as she blasts herself up into the air. And this is when she would aim both of her hands at the sludge villain, as she would say, "Full explosion!" She would blast a giant explosion which would actually dislocate one of her arms. She would launch a giant explosion at the sludge villain, which would actually get blown to pieces, just like All Might's Texas Smash would, as she would actually land at the ground barely. As this is when All Might would arrive, seeing that this girl was able to launch such a strong explosion. And the reason for this is because this Katsuki would actually be stronger. Seeing that she actually has fuel and motivation to train, she would actually have way stronger of an ability, and her hand-to-hand combat prowess would actually be unrivaled by any of the other kids. She would actually be a sort of Urza character, I guess you could say. As yes, she's gonna be the Urza to Deku. So yeah, this is how that stuff's gonna be going for now. As this is when we're actually gonna be cutting over to when All Might says, "Kid, how did you do that?" And she would look towards All Might and say, "All Might, can I get your autograph?" And she would pull out a notebook, and All Might would say, "Yeah, sure thing." So he would then begin to ask her what her quirk is, and she would tell him that her quirk is nitroglycerin sweat, which pretty much lets her release explosions, and pretty powerful ones at that. As seeing that this All Might actually doesn't have that injury, but he is still looking for a successor, since this is around the time that Nana was actually looking for one. And All Might's not exactly prioritizing it, so when he saw this girl, he actually just had a bit of a familiarity towards his master. When he looked towards this girl and the determination she had towards what she was doing, he could kind of see his master in her. He could see a piece of her. So he would then look towards Katsuki and ask her, and tell her about his quirk, One for All, as he would begin to explain its intricacies and not actually be able to debuff, since this All Might doesn't have that injury, as I had already stated. And this is when Katsuki would actually be pretty intrigued by the notion that quirks can be passed on, as All Might would actually offer her the chance to train with her and ask her if she would be willing to be his successor, as he and her during this time would have actually been bottling up the sludge villain, who at this point would still be unconscious. And this is when Katsuki would think about Deku. She was actually about to decline, but she would think, "I need this power to find Deku. If he's out there somewhere, with this, I could find him. And I could bring him back to Inko. And myself." And she would look towards All Might and tell him, "Yes, I will become your successor." As All Might would smile, thinking that this is perfect. As for the next 10 months, she would actually proceed to train with All Might, as we're just going to cover this very briefly. As for the first 4 months, she would be pretty much doing training in terms of moving the trash, and in terms of the rest of the 6 months that she has, she would be training in One for All way harder than Deku would have ever done, pushing herself 2 times harder because she has more of a drive to become strong. She needs it. She wants to find Deku, and having this rush would actually make her stronger than the Bakugo in the original canon, which because she would have a stronger determination and sheer will to push herself beyond the limitations of her body. COVID. COVID. Anyways, this is when she is actually able to muster at the 10 months 37% full calorie, as this is where we're pretty much going to end off on, this little All Might and Katsuki stuff, as we're now going to be jumping over to Deku's perspective. One more thing I forgot to mention. This is when, she would pretty much thank All Might, and she would talk to All Might about Deku. As during this time, she would have actually been able to open up to All Might and tell him about her friend Deku, who she had lost at a young age, who would actually be the one who inspired her to become a hero, since she didn't think she was actually going to get that great of a quirk, so she didn't ever want to, but Deku would have actually given her that inspiration and that push. He would have told her to be better than herself, and her, her blonde hair is something that Deku loved. As All Might would look towards, Katsuki, as he would say, it's a pretty great story. As this version of Katsuki would actually not have the hair that, Mitsuki would actually have. She would actually have that Urza haircut, but just blonde. That's pretty much how that would happen. And anyways, UA entrance exam, she would pass, as we don't really care too much about that, as this is when they would do the heroes versus villains, as well as, other stuff that they do in terms of school. And this is when we're actually going to be jumping back over to Deku's side, as he would actually be put up to the task by All For One, as at this point Deku would actually be 15 years old, as Deku would actually be put up to the task of eliminating All Might by All For One. Seeing that this is All For One's enemy, and this is sort of going to be Deku's graduation exam for him. If Deku's able to accomplish this goal, All For One is going to take his body and use it for his own selfish desires. As come on now, we all knew what All For One was gonna do with this Deku and Shigaraki the manga. So yeah, this is pretty much how that happens. Now, this is when Deku would have actually had more of his evil side embraced. As during this entire time, that brainwashing would have definitely pushed Deku to the level of, just evilness that Jellal was on. As, this is when we would have a Deku who would pretty much be really powerful at this point. His control over his abilities are pretty much unrivaled. And after all these years of training, and Deku being 15 years old, he would have all of Jellal's heavenly body magic moves down, such as Meteor, Grand Chariot, Sema, Altaris, Abyss Break, Jui Loxing, which I probably butchered, and Pleiades, which you guys can actually look those up as what those attacks are. As number 1, just in case you guys didn't catch that, Meteor. Number 2, Grand Chariot. Number 3, Sema, S-E-M-A. Altaris, which is pretty self-explanatory, I think, and Abyss Break, as well as Jui Loxing, as I'm pretty sure I butchered that, and Pleiades, as those are the moves that Deku's actually going to be having access to. As this Deku's not exactly going to have dark magic or fire or earth or none of that, since if I gave him that, he would be god tier in this universe. So I figured I'd kind of make him a little less broken. So yeah, this is when during this time that, Katsuki was doing her heroes versus villains stuff and all that, Deku would actually be using this time to recruit some very small time villains for his cause. As one of those people would actually be, the people who you guys would expect. But during that time, actually we're going to go ahead and skip over to 1 year before that. During that time, Deku would have actually seen a young boy with yellow hair and a black lightning strike in his hair. As Deku would have actually asked, put on a facade, so he would act like a nice kid. So you'd pretty much get Kaminari to come over to his house, as Kaminari would. And this is when All For One would decide that his quirk is definitely going to be useful for this. He can definitely be a great hero, and he could be trained in terms of, Deku's manipulation. So this is why Kaminari is actually going to be the villain, or the traitor, I guess you could say. As Deku's actually, in this time, going to help Kaminari be brainwashed and taken in by All For One, as he's going to be the sort of, the thing. As he's going to downplay himself and pretty much just do what Kaminari does in the original canon, not exactly showing up too much and just kind of putting on an act. As at this point, we actually have to cover one more thing. Deku and Kurogiri's relationship. They would actually have a very solid relationship, with Deku having a really, decent amount of respect for Kurogiri. Seeing that Kurogiri would have actually been one of the people who would have actually helped Deku with his power development and his training. Since Kurogiri was actually a very good role model or figure for Deku to look up to. He's very well mannered, and Deku would actually have a very strong relationship with Kurogiri. Seeing that Kurogiri is one of his only friends, which means that Kurogiri and Deku are actually going to be in sync. Which means that Kurogiri is going to actually be able to do some double team attacks with Deku, such as using Meteor and opening a portal and opening another one right where someone else is at. Yeah, that's going to be overpowered. So this is when the day of the USJ would come, and I'm just going to go and say that at this point, Kaminari would have actually been bringing the intel to All For One, as All For One would definitely be extremely happy by these developments. Deku was going to give his chance to take down All For One much sooner than he would have ever expected, as he would smile and he would call Deku to go up to him. As at this point, Deku would have actually had a permanent name change to Jellal, as that's what actually All For One would have actually switched his name to, Jellal Fernandes. And the reason that his last name is Fernandes is because we're just going to say that All For One that Offerone's last name is actually going to be Fernandes in this version. So that's why Deku's last name is going to be Fernandes. So, yeah, that's pretty much how that's going to be going. So in terms of UA, things are going to be going pretty smoothly with no real difficulty. And since Deku's not there, he would pretty much just be the exception. As we're going to go ahead and pull in who would be pretty good in this class. We're going to say that Monoma was actually dragged into... Monoma was actually dragged into Class 1A because of his copy quirk. And this time Monoma doesn't have his weird personality because this time he actually thinks that he's in the right class that he deserves to be in. Of course, he's still a jerk and he still talks a lot of smack, but not exactly as bad as the one that we have in the original canon. So this, version of what's called Monoma would actually be a little more bearable. So, yeah, the day of the USJ comes, and I guess I should explain more about how Kaminari... Actually, no, I already did that, so no. So, I guess I should explain how this procedure is going to go. Kaminari, Deku, Offerone, and the League of Villains would be preparing their assault, as Offerone would have actually developed the gnome who he knew was actually going to be able to take it out by All Might. But it's going to be a very good, moment to distract the heroes, giving Deku some good time to maybe find some students to brainwash them. As Deku would have actually had Kaminari, jam the signal with his electricity quirk so the heroes cannot contact anybody, as well as giving them information on the USJ and how that's going to be going down. And since All Might doesn't have his weird, setbacks, All Might's actually going to be able to essentially be there. As in this version, Deku and Kaminari, even though they are both brainwashed, they would have a pretty dope bond with each other. And a little bit of personality that they have from their old selves would actually mix together very well with each other. As Deku would respect Kaminari for his powerful quirk, as Kaminari is actually way stronger than he lets on. He has full control over his quirk at this point, since he would have actually been training with Deku, and his quirk would actually be 3 times stronger than he lets on. So this is essentially how Kaminari's development would go in terms of this series. So now, this is when we're actually going to be cutting back to Katsuki, as she'd pretty much be sitting on the bus as they're on the way to USJ, and she would be sitting by a window, pretty quiet, as she's thinking about Deku. Thinking about the last time that she saw him, as she wishes that she would have had the chance to tell Deku how she feels about him, since she would have actually loved Deku ever since she was a kid. And after all these years of just thinking about him, it would just grow more and more. It would be in the way that Urza misses Jellal, and she would actually have a bit of a weak spot for him, as he would kind of be a sort of thing that could actually hold her back in terms of a battle. If somebody was to fight her and bring up Deku, she'd probably be caught off guard and taken down for that. So that's not exactly the greatest thing for her to be having at this point, but it's something that is there nonetheless. So, yeah. Now, this is when they would arrive, and 13 would give her little hero speech, and she would tell them all about how quirks can be very dangerous, and this is essentially how, that would go. Things would go by very normal, and this is when a portal would open up in front of all of the heroes. As Deku would actually have as there would actually be two Kurogiri, since Kurogiri is missed, so I'm assuming he could split himself. As he would tell Kurogiri to teleport all of the students away before Deku can even jump in. As Kurogiri would jump in there, and before thinking at all, he would shoot everybody away, as he would shoot All Might purposefully right in front of the Nomu. As All Might and the Nomu would proceed to engage in an amazing battle, which is actually going to be really fun to watch. But this version of All Might, since he actually is a little older, is actually going to be about 90% of what he was at his prime. Since he's not exactly going to be exactly the same, since he is a little older, but it is going to be taking him a little longer to take down the Nomu, since he's not exactly going to go all out. He's going to test the waters, and since he won't know about the regeneration of the shock absorption, it'll be way harder for him to take down the normal. But as this is happening, Deku would actually be having his fun with the students, as all the students were actually taken to the boat would actually be taken down by Deku, as Deku would pretty much just be standing there. As when they would arrive, Deku would use Meteor, as he would jump into the water and take them all down, as he would drown them into the waters, as they would be taken by the villains. And the villains would grab them as they take them down and knock them out into unconsciousness, beating them and bruising them badly. As they would throw them onto shores, they would not actually kill these students, since they actually were told by Deku not to be causing any casualties. As this is when Deku would proceed to mercilessly beat on most of the students, like Todoroki and, Tokiyami and, the Tail Kid. He would proceed to wail on these students, as he would use a meteor to blitz around and just be taking down students minute one by one, as he would weaken them all down. And this is when Deku would actually run into Aizawa, as this is when Deku would proceed to actually beat on the students, as Aizawa would actually jump in front of Deku, telling him that that's enough, as he would activate his quirk, trying to take off Deku's abilities. As this is when Aizawa would actually smile, thinking that this must be easy. As Deku would go along with this, as he knows Aizawa, he would stop using his abilities. So he would rush towards Aizawa, and as Aizawa would throw his scarf at Deku, Deku would catch it as he pulls it in with nothing but sheer strength. As Aizawa would get dragged up to Deku, as Deku would uppercut him, sending him flying. As Deku would blitz Aizawa, grabbing him by the face and smashing it into the ground. As Aizawa's face would be hurt, as Deku would proceed to smash it into the ground. As Aizawa would kick Deku by his back, as Deku would actually be caught off guard at this, thinking, wow, looks like you have a little bit of fight left in you. As he would crack his neck and knuckles, as he would then look towards Aizawa and say, let's get started, I guess. As he would then look towards him and say, Meteor! As he would blitz him in an instant and take Aizawa down, leaving him in the critical condition that he was in the original canon. So, this is at the time where Kurogiri would have actually handled the Hero 13, as the rest of the students would actually have been, most of them, taken down. Most of them except for, Araka, Momo, and Kaminari's area. As Kaminari would actually save them, trying to put on more of a facade. As that situation would pretty much go as you would expect it to go as it did in canon. So this is actually going to go very, very swiftly. As this is when Katsuki would actually finish taking down her villains along with Kirishima. As this is when All Might would actually finish the Nomu, throwing him out of the USJ. As this is when Deku would actually, be teleported in front of All Might. As All Might would look at this boy who looks no older than his successor. As he would say, what are you doing here, boy? Get out of here and turn yourself in before this has to get ugly. As Deku would just look towards him and smile. As he would then say, Meteor. As he would rush towards All Might and hit him with a side with a blow straight to the gut. As he would send All Might flying. As this is when All Might would pretty much just be holding his stomach as he would be coughing out a little bit of blood, since that blow would have definitely caught, Deku off guard. As this is when Katsuki would actually blitz in there, as she would look at this boy with blue hair who looks exactly like Deku did, except he has some sort of red marking on his face. She wonders what that is, but nonetheless, this is when All Might would rush back at Deku, and right as Deku was about to dodge it and land the finishing blow on All Might, this is when she would yell, Deku! As Deku would hear that name and just be caught off guard as he would look towards her direction. And this is when All Might would come in with one of his most powerful blows, as he would say, United States of Smash! As he would throw a blow straight at Deku, which would smash and break 3 of Deku's ribs on his left side. As Deku would actually hold himself as he would be thrown into a wall, which was nearby. As this would actually render Deku a little bit useless, as he would be holding his side very in pain. So he would cough up some blood, as he would then smile towards All For One and turn his attentions away from Katsuki. As Kirishima would then rush in there and try to fight Deku, but this is when Deku would grab Kirishima and hit him, shattering his hardening and leaving him in a very critical condition. As Deku would then rush towards All Might, as Deku would actually be torturing All Might, I guess you could say, as he would land blow after blow, as he would then use Meteor and his other attacks, as he would then create light beams, as he would shoot them towards All Might, as All Might would get shot by these attacks. As this is when Deku would proceed to say, Grand Chariot, as he would then hold his hands out, as he would then hold, face your judgment, by the 7 stars. I'm pretty sure that's what Jellal says. I have a little bit of time remembering what that says, but you guys know what I'm talking about. as Deku would have that attack charging up at All Might as All Might's on the ground about to die. As if this attack hits, All Might's dead. That's 3, 2, but this is when Katsuki would rush at Deku, hitting him with one of her most powerful explosions, along with 35% of full cowling, as she would send Deku flying, hurtling onto the ground. As she would say, Deku, it's me! You don't remember me? Kachan, please, Deku, please. As Deku would look towards her and say, you bastard, as he would then crack his neck. As this is when Deku would pretty much rush at her as he grabs her face and slams her into the ground. And this is when he would beat her head mercilessly, as he would then proceed to beat on her. As this is when Deku was about to land one of the critical blows. As before he could do that, he would actually grab his head as he would say, "Ah! What is going on?" As he would hold his head and just be like, "Ugh, ugh," as he would just be holding himself in agony. As Kurogiri would notice that Deku was actually in extreme pain. As he wouldn't know what's going on, but Deku's symbol in his face would start glowing as Deku would say, "Oh, what's going on?" And this is when All Might would, flick his finger at Deku as he would send Deku hurtling to the ground. As Deku would actually be in pain, as Kurogiri would actually grab Deku and teleport him away, as they would make a swift escape. As this is when the rest of the heroes would arrive, grabbing All Might and tending to his injury. As Deku would have actually gave All Might the same injury that he would have had in canon, limiting him to what he had had in the original. As this is when Kurogiri would actually teleport Deku away. As at this point, Deku would be on the floor coughing up blood, holding his head, having the biggest headache he's ever experienced in his entire life. As All For One would actually teleport over to Deku, as he would see Deku on its knees and holding his head, as All For One would kick Deku, telling him, "What happened? You had one chance and you ruined it." As Deku would just be holding his head in pain, as memories would just be flashing back, as Deku's pain would go away, as Deku would look towards All For One bloodlusted, as he lunges towards All For One saying, "Meteor," as this one All For One would use one of his strongest quirks to rush at Deku, as he would grab Deku's head, strengthening the mind control back to where it was before, as Deku would get up slowly after that happens, and then fall into unconsciousness. As yes, it would have strengthened it, but after using that power 2 times, Deku's body would actually develop a sort of immunity towards it. So Deku would actually have a little bit of that memory back. Not exactly the entire picture, but he would definitely be getting pieces by pieces back to normal. As Deku would fake that he's back to normal. As All For One would just, crack a little bit of a smile as he would then say, "Well, I guess it can't be helped." As Deku would just be tended to by Kurogiri. As in terms of the heroes, the cleanup would have gone smoothly, but there would have been a lot of students and heroes in agony. So the the sports festival would actually, still be had at the same time because, recovery girls there. So they would all be recovered pretty decent, but one person who actually wouldn't be able to show up there would actually be All Might. Seeing that he was actually injured way beyond what anybody would have thought. His injury wouldn't have actually been able to be healed properly, as All Might would actually be out of commission, like I have just said. And this is when Deku would decide that he wants to find out more about that blonde girl who was able to make him stop. She was able to make him stop for a second, and that second cost Deku taking down All Might. Since in this version, Deku would actually develop a sort of a hatred towards All Might, since All For One would have actually twisted Deku's views on All Might as a hero, and All Might would actually have the goal for himself to take All Might down, because this is something that Deku wants to do for himself, as he would actually view All Might as somebody who's not even worthy to be calling himself the #1 hero, the symbol of peace, symbol of hope. He must be. He's not even powerful enough to take him on. If that girl wouldn't have gotten in the way, he would have died. As Deku would ask Kurogiri to turn on the sports festival, as Deku would just be anchored in his room, as he would then start to watch the sports festival. As the sports festival would go, as you guys would imagine it would go, as Deku would pretty much be watching it on the big screen in his room, as every time Deku would see Katsuki, he would get a huge headache. His mind was beginning to overcome the effects of the quirk which All For One would have used to brainwash Deku. As Deku would start getting more things back, as the quirk that All For One would use would proceed to get weaker and weaker, as All For One would have actually not have been aware of this. But this is when Deku would actually start to become a little bit of a loose cannon. This is when the US Sports Festival would pretty much end, and this is when Stain's situation would be happening. As this Deku would actually decide that he wants to recruit that Stain fellow because he seems like he knows what he's doing and he has a proper cause. As Deku would find Stain in the dawn of night, as he would ask Stain if he would like to be recruited, Stain would pretty much try to rush at Deku, but Deku would dodge Stain's attack. So he would pin him to the ground and tell him that he wants to talk business. "You don't need to see what my character is like." Stain would say, "Very well." And this is when Deku would proceed to negotiate with Stain, as he would tell Stain that he's going to have the full support of the League of Villains to do his goal of taking down all false heroes, since they're just as bad as the villains. As this is when Stain would actually agree to go and work with the League of Villains. As this is when things would actually proceed to go by a little different. In terms of the Hoso incident, she would still go with Gran Torino, and at this point, she would actually be able to, use 40% of full cowling. And at this point, she would also have developed the quirk of Black Whip, which, if you guys don't know what that is the quirk that Deku's actually going to be developing in the 5th season of My Hero Academia. I'm pretty sure I could give him more quirks, but I think I'm going to wait. So this is when Katsuki would actually, in this version, be the one who goes with Gran Torino, and she's actually the one who's going to be saving Ida in this situation, as well as fighting Stain to a stalemate, as Deku would have actually still had the Nomu, rampage through the city, as all the rest of the heroes would be there. And this time, when Stain would have actually been broken loose and telling the heroes that they're all fake, instead of just passing out and being taken away, this is when something different would happen. Stain would fall into unconsciousness, as under him, a purple mist would appear, as Stain would fall into the portal and be taken away. As the video of Stain showing his true intentions and his goal would go viral, as this is when Stain's message would touch the heart of a couple of people that we have in the original. As this is when Deku would tell the doctor to heal Stain, as well as give him an upgrade to his quirk, as the doctor would do whatever he can, as he was upgrade Stain, as well as giving him a speed quirk, which would definitely help Stain in the long run. So he's actually going to be the speedster of the group, if you guys know what I'm doing. Some of you guys may, some of you guys might not. So yeah, anyways, this is when Stain and Deku would actually get to know each other more, and Stain would talk to Deku more, so he would get to know what Deku was really like, as Deku would begin to actually talk to Stain about what he feels with that girl and how that girl triggers something within his mind. Stain would ask Deku if he's maybe brainwashed or something like that. As Deku would say he doesn't know, but for now, he's just going to put it to the side. He'll figure that out later and question All For One, and if he doesn't give him his answers, he'll just have to kill him. But for now, he wants to focus more on taking down All Might, the symbol of peace. As Stain would actually be against this, but seeing that he doesn't believe that he can actually do it, he would just go by. Kind of willy-nilly, I guess you could say. Stain would actually not exactly have that much of an objection towards Deku. Now, this is when the video of Stain would essentially go viral, and this is when people would start to seek out the League of Villains, and things would proceed as normal up until the Forest arc, as they would do their normal provisional license exams and their finals, as Katsuki would actually have to do it with Ida. She would actually do very well against All Might, saying that she has 40% and All Might's weakened. She would be able to hold them off until Ida was able to run off, just like in the way that Deku did. And with the enhancement to her quirk, she would definitely be a foe to be reckoned with. So she would be extremely powerful. And this is when Kaminari would tell Deku about the Forest training arc, that this may be the perfect opportunity. There won't be that many heroes from what he could tell, and this is where things will actually take a turn. Seeing after what happened in the USJ attack, they would actually up the security and have 5 more heroes go along with them. These heroes would pretty much be irrelevant, as actually no, it's gonna be Gang Orca, some low tier other heroes who don't really matter, and Mirko. Yeah, we're gonna have Mirko in this. As This is essentially going to be their second attempt to killing All Might, and maybe, just maybe, taking that kid Tokiyami. It seems that he has a bit of a dark side, and if they could, hone that, they could definitely do something with this kid. As that's essentially how that's going to be happening. As they would be recruiting the same people for the same things as usual. Muscular, Stain, and the rest of the people would be in terms of the Vanguard Action Squad, except this time, Deku would actually go along with them. And in terms of the Force training arc, everything would pretty much go as you guys would expect it to go, up until the nighttime. And this is when All Might would actually be there. As in this version of events, All Might would be the one who would actually follow Koda. But when he arrives, Koda would actually be dead. Koda would have died since Deku wasn't there to come a bit sooner and save him from Muscular. When the stuff happened and All Might rushed towards Koda, Koda was dead. And he saw nothing but Muscular crushing the boy in his hands. As All Might would just grit his teeth as he would look at Muscular, as he would then tell this guy that he's gonna pay for that. As he would then fight Muscular to a standstill. As he would push Muscular into the mountain in the same way that Deku had done. But at this point, All Might would definitely have been weakened. But since he doesn't break his bones, he would still have enough to help more of the students out in terms of the rest of the people. So this is when Deku's squad would actually be tasked to grab that blonde girl, as he wants to know more about her. As Deku's actually running through the forest looking for her, but he can't find her for some reason. That's his main objective. So he decides that instead of doing that, he's actually going to be, helping taking down some of the students and helping taking down the heroes such as Gang Orca and the rest of them. As Stain and the rest of the villains like Dabi and Twice would actually end up being taken down by Aizawa. Seeing that he has the perfect quirk to counterattack them and restrain them and take them down, he would actually be able to restrain Dabi and Twice. In terms of the Stain, Muscular, and Stain, Magma, and Spinner, this battle would actually be very hard fought, as Gang Orca would actually be there helping them to take down Stain, as he was a very formidable foe. As, let's say, Mirko was also there, as she was helping out with all this stuff. But since this is happening, this entirety of the forest training stuff is actually going to last a little longer, since Deku's looking for that blonde girl, but he just cannot seem to find her. And because of this, a lot more students will actually end up getting hurt, and some of them will actually die. Stain would have actually been taking care of two of the wild pussycats, as he would have actually killed both of them. And Ida would have actually died because Stain would have actually caught him off guard before he even ran into them. So he would have actually killed Ida, seeing that Ida had a little bit of a bloodlust for him, and he would have told him that he was a fake hero. As Momo and the other kid with the little, chip quirk would have actually been killed in this version of events. So this is when we would actually have a fight in which Deku would actually end up finding All Might. As during this time, Moonfish, Todoroki, and Katsuki would be in a very big fight. As this is when Deku would actually be distracted, seeing that the explosions are going off in the distance, as he would think, bingo, all I have to do is take this All Might out. Finally accomplish my goal, and then I could find that girl. As this is when we would actually have the fight between All Might and Deku, as they would get into a very intense fight where All Might is actually forced to push himself beyond anything that All Might would actually have ever thought that he would actually have to do. All Might would be forced to push himself to the absolute limits to have to fight this this menace, as he would use everything and anything at his disposal, in the same way that All-For-One would have fought him in the original canon, in the little Camino incident. I believe that's what it's called, the Camino incident. So this is essentially how that little fight is going to be going. And Deku would actually be having his time, taking a sweet time. Not even going all out from the beginning, just weakening this symbol of peace and showing him just how fragile he is. As Deku would proceed to kick All Might away into a mountain. As All Might would just be on his hands and knees on the ground. As Deku would put his foot on top of All Might's head, as he would say, "Kiss my foot, you dog. You don't deserve the title of the #1 hero. You don't deserve anything. As he would say, you're always in the spotlight. And if you would have been there that day, or any other hero for that fact, my mother would still be alive. As he would then kick All Might in the skull, smashing him down as All Might just coughing out blood. And this is when Deku would proceed to smash his foot into All Might. As this is when Katsuki would jump into it barely before All Might was dead. And she would send a huge explosion, an AP shot, right into Deku's side of the chest. As Deku would jump back, barely getting grazed by that attack, as a fight between Deku and Katsuki would engage. As Deku would proceed to body her, he would proceed to massacre her in the way that he did against All Might. But this time things would be different. He would say, why? Why do you always get in my way? As he would rush towards Katsuki and hit her with one of his strongest attacks. But before he can do it, he would then have a second thoughts, as he would then look at her and say, hey, wait, I need you. I'll keep you alive for just a little longer. As this is when, midway through the battle, after he realizes this, Deku would proceed to fall to the ground, holding his head in extreme agony as he begins to scream out to the heavens, as he would fall to his knees and say, "Ah! Ah!" As Deku would hold his head, as he would just be screaming in complete agony, as Katsuki would watch as she's beaten and bruised, as she would just be watching as Deku's on the ground, extremely unstable. And this is when Kurogiri would grab Deku, taking him away, as Deku would just fall to the ground as he's holding his head and gaining his composure. So all of his memories would come shooting right back to him, as Deku would just remember Katsuki, his mother, the doubts that he had about All For One. As Deku would just have all of it come to him at once, as Deku would scream and go, ah! 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 As Deku would just be screaming in agony to the heavens. As, you know, this is when Deku would have a little bit of himself come back. As after about an hour of this, Deku would find himself again. As the rest of the Vanguard Action Squad would have actually been taken down by, you know, an All Might who was trying his best to hold on. But this All Might would barely hang on to life. As Katsuki would have actually rushed in there and helped any way she could. But due to the fact that Mirko was there and Gang Orca was there, the rest of the villains were taken down very swiftly. And since Aizawa was able to take down the two big guys and All Might took down Muscular, this cleanup would go by pretty easily. Now, as this is happening, Katsuki would be extremely confused, asking what's going on with Deku. Why is he so unstable? Wondering if that's even him. As Deku would look towards Kurogiri after getting his composure back, as he would then look towards him and say, take me to All For One. I need to have a talk with him. As Kurogiri would say, are you sure about this, young master? As he would be teleported to All For One. As this is when Deku would step in front of him, as he would say, why the hell did you brainwash me into being your dirty dog? As he would say, I'm gonna give you one chance to tell me, or I'll kill you. As All For One would say, looks like you noticed, young brat. I knew someday that thing would wear off, and I was hoping I could take control of your body by that time. As he would say, it looks like I don't have enough time for this. As he would then look towards Deku and shoot a black tendril at Deku, as it would impale him right through the gut. As Deku would grab that tendril and rip it right out of himself. As Deku would look towards All For One and say, that was your only chance to talk. And now, you're gonna die. As he would look towards All For One, as he would begin to batter All For One way worse than anybody could have ever done. As this time, Deku would proceed to kick him into the sky, as All For One would be there trying to fight back and use a flight quirk that he has. As Deku would grab him by the back, as he would snap him into his knee midair. As Deku would grab him by the legs and smash him into the ground, as he would then proceed to do what Hulk does and smash him onto the ground back and forth, as he would then grab All For One, as he would then smash his head into the ground, as he would then put him on a curb and curb stomp him. And this is when All For One would just be in extreme agony, and Deku would just be letting all of his bloodlust go out, as Deku would say, Grand Chariot, face your judgment. As this is when Deku would proceed to pretty much use all of his attacks as he would proceed to destroy All For One's body, as All For One would be no more, as he would have actually disintegrated All For One after that attack of Grand Chariot, where he created the seven light blasts down on All For One, which pretty much creates a small pattern, as he would proceed to then say, face your judgment, true heavenly magic, as he would shoot it down towards All For One and disintegrate it. And this is when Deku's, and Kurogiri and everybody else's, hold over themselves would be taken off, as All For One would have actually, his grasp over anybody who he would have actually had under his mind control would be weakened extremely heavily, as this is when Deku would proceed to pass out after all that power exertion, as Kurogiri would stare down to his master, as he would then say, well, I guess I don't have to follow his orders anymore, as this is when Deku would proceed to be like trying to be healed by Kurogiri, but it would be for nothing. Deku would not be able to be healed by Kurogiri, and when Kurogiri takes him to the quirk doctor, he refuses to help him after he saw how he killed his master. He'd rather die than help, as Kurogiri would accommodate for that, as he would use his portal to split him in half, ripping his body apart halfway, as he would then rush Deku to the hero side, as he would then take him in and turn himself in, telling them to please help him, as this is when the heroes would rush Deku to a hospital, as they would heal him, as a lot of them would have a debate saying whether they should or should help this kid, as Katsuki would actually rush in that room and say, help him! He must not have been under the right state of mind. That's nothing like the kid I once knew. He almost killed All Might, but he'll be fine. As they would proceed to heal Deku, and afterwards, 2 weeks would pass as Deku would be healed back to normal. As this is when they would put him in jail. As this is when, after 1 week, after Katsuki would have the strength to go visit Deku, she would visit him and finally learned about what happened to Deku. As Deku would explain to her about what really happened that day, as a man known as All For One would have actually been the one responsible for everything. He would have brainwashed Deku and used him as a pawn all these years, and Deku would have been nonetheless smart enough to realize it, as Deku would have actually never been able to realize what had actually been going on, as he proceeds to apologize for what he did to her, what he did to the students, and everything that happened, as he would say that although he could say that it was all For One, he would say that some of that was him, and he would say that he's gonna rot in this jail for the rest of his life, and he hopes she has a good life, as he would thank her for being the reason that Deku was able to break out of that, because if it wasn't for her, who knows what would have happened. As Deku would thank her for helping him see the light, as if it wasn't for her, he would have killed the symbol of peace. And this is when she would proceed to visit Deku all the time for the next 7 months, as Deku would be extremely happy to see her, as at least he gets to see her sometimes. He wishes that things were different. He wishes that he would have had this time to really become a pro hero and be alongside Katsuki. He wonders what would have happened if that would have been the case, as this is when during this time the Chisaki situation would happen, as we're actually going to be saying that UA would have actually been shut down for 4 months, but they would actually fight back for their rights, as 3 students would have actually died that day, and they would reopen. And this is when Katsuki would go on the little overhaul stuff, and she would find Eri. And in this situation, when they're finding people who can do this, she would say that she doesn't know if any of them here can even take them down. She would actually look towards Tsunade and suggest that maybe Jellal can do it, since he's changed his ways. He's changed everything. He's not the same as he was. As he would say, oh yeah, he almost killed All Might. He doesn't deserve to help. As some of the other heroes would actually be weird about this. They would think that that's actually a good idea, but the risks to this are just far too great, as they don't know whether they should or shouldn't go through with this plan. But she would say that they could have him under their watch, and if anything goes wrong, they could even put something on him to assure that Deku doesn't go astray, as they would decide that maybe Jellal can do it, since he isn't under that bastard's control, maybe he can do something. As she would bring up the fact that all this time he only did that because he was brainwashed, and Inko would actually come by to visit Deku after all these months. As she would stare at her baby, as she would hold the mirror and the glass, as she would say, "Izuku, is that you?" As Deku would look towards her and say, "Yeah, it's me, Mom." As she would say, "What happened?" As Deku would explain everything that would have happened to him during these last couple of years to his mother. She would be crying, saying that she wishes that things could have been different. She wishes that she would have been taken instead, and Deku was left because she's so sorry. She's so sorry for leaving him to be taken like that. As Deku would say that it's okay. She couldn't have done anything either way. As this is when we would go over the overhaul situation. And in terms of Deku handling this would go by rather smoothly, as he would actually be under watch by Mirio and Katsuki, as he would rush in with Mirio, as him and Mirio would actually handle Chisaki. But when things are about to happen, when Mirio was actually about to take down, Chisaki, and Chisaki was down on the ground, Mirio would have turned around asking Eri if she was okay. And in that split second, Overhaul would have overhauled Mirio, as Mirio would turn to dust, and Katsuki would barely arrive as Overhaul would have taken down Mirio, killing him. As Deku would look towards Mirio and say, "No." He would say, "Grand Chariot, face your judgment by the heavenly stars," as he would have 7 light beams disintegrate Chisaki, doing what was necessary to take him down. As a video was actually taken of Deku doing what he had done, as Deku would immediately be rushed back to the prison. As this is when the government would actually see that video and see how smoothly Deku was able to fight. Think of that, maybe if the government could have him under control, they could be something to be reckoned with. He's even stronger than All Might, and if they can have him work for them as a way to accommodate for what he's done, he can be Japan's greatest weapon. As the government would hold a meeting to essentially ask Deku whether he would like to become a paid military worker, as he would pretty much take down all of the threats that are looming over the world, as Deku would actually accept. He would accept to work for them, as they would give him the chance of ultimately choosing to work for them or being killed now, or put on the chair. As Deku would decide that he's going to work for them, but Deku would tell them that if he's going to be doing this, he wants a team. As Deku would actually begin to form a group like he had done in Fairy Tail, except there'd be different members, as he would recruit Dabi, Toga, Stain, Twice, Kurogiri, and Kaminari to his cause. As all of these people would have actually, after all these months of getting to know the real Deku, and Deku convincing them that what they were doing was wrong, they would change their ways, and they would take the chance to be able to be set free and be able to live their normal lives, or as normal as they can live it. As for the next couple of years, Deku and his team would be known as the Orashion Seis, as they would proceed to take down all of the greatest villains and all of the people like mob bosses and people who the government pretty much hated and had a reason to take them down, as that's essentially what Deku would do. And in terms of Deku and Katsuki, he would see her one day, and she would ask him if maybe they can get together finally, as Deku would tell her that he can't. He has to atone for his sins, and these sins are not hers. So he's going to be doing this alone. But maybe one day, he and her can live a happy life together. As Katsuki would just have tears go down her face, as Deku would smile as he walks away with the squad. As this is where we're going to be ending. What if Deku was Jellal Fernandes. I hope you guys enjoyed this story, guys, since it's a little different than what I'm actually used to doing. But I hope that you guys did end up enjoying this amazing story nonetheless. Since this is a little different than what I'm used to doing, but I hope you guys did enjoy this story nonetheless. With that being said, guys, thank you guys for 7K. And as you guys all know, it has been your boy Zether. And as you guys all know, I am out.